Now we're going to talk more about associated persons. The continuing education requirements again. We have the firm element. That must be taken each year at the office. That must be supervised. This isn't something you can take at home or anything like that. It has to be done in the office. If you miss it, you're going to have to go in and actually do it in front of a supervisor or principal to make sure that verify that you did in fact watch it. The regulatory element must be completed within 120 days of your second registration anniversary, and then every 3 years after that. That is actually a test that you're going to be able to take at a computer at home and things like that. So you don't have to worry so much about the regulatory element. It's not a particularly difficult test. It's certainly no more difficult than these real ones. And I've been told by people, and I found it certainly to be significantly easier. I know some people don't like it, but it's really not nearly as bad as these tests. You just have to do it again the second anniversary after you're registered, and then every 3 years after that. Reportable activities. These are things that associated persons must report to their broker-dealer. Private securities transactions. Any securities transaction you either engage in or that you try and sell to a client. Primarily the ones that they're worried about are when you're trying to sell to a client. If it's just a securities transaction that you personally want to be involved in, that we're going to get to in a little bit. Basically, it just requires notification. But if you're thinking about, you found a security and you're thinking about trying to sell it to a client, that you can't do without permission, not simply telling them. Violation is called selling away. The idea is, if I have a client that comes in and wants to give me $100,000 to generate income, and I could sell them a bond mutual fund from my broker-dealer, or I happen to also have this real estate investment, and if this person gives me $100,000, I could put them into this thing over here, totally separate from my broker-dealer, but they could buy them some rental properties, and they actually might generate more income than the bond fund, so I'm going to recommend this security over here, this investment opportunity over here, and I happen to get paid when I give them referrals. Can't do that. That's selling away. The other one is outside business activity. That requires knowledge, requires notification, not permission. This is for non-securities. Any way that you make money outside the broker-dealer, they need to be made aware of. I have 4. I sell jewelry, I tutor for 2 different companies, and I happen to run this small little securities training company called the Securities Guys. Some of you may have heard of that one. All of those were reported, were notified to my broker-dealer. The only one that they really cared about was the Securities Guys. It's the only one close enough. They asked me some more questions, and they made a request. And that request was that I don't mention their name, which is why as you go through, you'll see that I don't mention what broker-dealer I'm at. You can find out. It's not secret. You can look me up if you really want to. But that's why I specifically don't mention their name, is because they've specifically asked me not to. Political contributions are also watched. FINRA Rule 2030 is what covers the political contributions. It's a maximum of $350 to any candidate that we can vote for, and $150 for any candidate that we cannot vote for. We also can't solicit or coordinate contributions. That's a complicated way of basically saying we can't use contributions for bribery. We can't go to a client that happens to be a mayor or a governor of a state or a city where we're trying to work with a pension plan or something like that and explain, we'll help you get reelected. We'll give you contributions if you do business with us. And yeah, you can't do any of that. That's the idea of soliciting or coordinating contributions. No contributions to government entities the member is trying to engage in distribution or solicitation. You can't contribute to a mayor's campaign if we're trying to underwrite the muni bond. Simple things like that. But new associates don't have to worry if you've given a large contribution recently. From 6 months before, they don't care. Once you're registered, they care, but even right before you become registered, they're not going to care about that. Gifts and entertainment. We want to again be careful with these. We mentioned these a couple times throughout these lectures because they are a little tricky. It looks simple, but they can be a bit weird. The idea is there's a $100 limit for gifts. For business entertainment, for business things like that, it's also $100. But the idea here is to try and prevent bribery, to try and prevent quid pro quos. That you do this and I'll give you a bunch of money. Can't do that. But gifts and marketing can be very close to these things. I can't be given a $1,000 leather jacket from ABC Investments, because I mean that's just bribery. I mean, why would they can't do that and try and get me to give them business? Now, if they were to give me $1,000 leather jacket that said ABC Investments on the back, well, that's probably an advertising expense, and that's totally different. So you got to be a little bit careful in thinking about these on what might be trying to corrupt, trying to bribe, trying to extort kind of thing versus what's just sort of a normal marketing kind of issue. Filing forms for associated persons. We have the Form U4 and the Form U5. The U4 is the initial registration form that we're all going to be filling out. If you're in the SIE, you haven't had to fill this out unless you've actually tried to take previous tests. But the SIE does not require a U4, but all of the others will. When you're ready to take the top-off exam, whether it's the Series 6 or the Series 7, you will need to be with a member firm who will help and will open your U4 application. The U5 is the withdrawal form. When we quit or when we're fired, the U5 gets written up. Changes must be updated within 30 days. Change of address, change of anything like that. Consequences of filing misleading information or omitting information could be termination or potentially other consequences, barring from FINRA. FINRA may say you cannot work for any member firm, things like that. It could be quite severe if you lie. Don't lie on these forms. Customer complaints. Customer complaints are defined as any written complaint, written communication from a client to the member firm regarding the activities of their reps in regards to transactions, securities, or funds. The longer you're in this business, the more likely you are going to have complaints. I have had two. One of which I remember, and I like telling because you'll find out why. There was a client. I went and saw this husband and wife. They had 2 kids. I think it was about an hour and a half, hour and 40-minute round trip. It was like an hour there and 40 minutes back because of traffic. I don't really remember. It was a while ago. And I drove out there, and I sat down and we reviewed everything, and they decided that they wanted to get a $500,000 life insurance policy on him, a $250,000 policy on her. We were going to be talking about a Roth IRA in addition to their 401k allocations, talking about 529s for the kids. But they wanted to get the life insurance set up first. Okay, filled out the applications, brought them to the office, submitted. This was back in a time when it was all on paper, back in the Stone Ages of the mid-2000s. So I submitted the applications. They came back a week or two later, called the client, chatted with them for a bit. Great couple. Okay, we set the time to go deliver it. I again drive out an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes round trip. Get there. They actually want to change the life insurance. They want to do $250,000 on him now and $100,000 on her. Okay, I mean, money's tight. There's issues. Okay, I understand. We still want to get these done. And I explained that they could have told me when I was at the office. It would have saved some time. They understood. They apologized for making me drive out there. Not a big deal. Take the change forms back again, fill that on paper, take them back to the office. Week or so later, a little less, the policies get reissued at the lower face. Call them up. Everything's great. Go out to deliver them. When I get there, they want to reduce him again. They want to reduce him to $100,000 and her to nothing. They've got some money problems, I understand. They did just fully chrome plate their motorcycle. They were very proud of that. I vividly remember that appointment where they were so excited about just finished chrome plating their motorcycle with 2 kids, and I don't believe they had any life insurance other than maybe 1 times their salary from work. So, I mean, their priorities were definitely in order. I mean, I know there were 2 kids and minimal life insurance from work. Chrome plating a motorcycle is far more important than making sure proper life insurance. But regardless, their priorities were their priorities. So I get back to the office again with the change form, rather bummed out that I spent now 4 or 5 hours driving for this client that keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. A couple days later, I get called into my supervisor's office. They filed a complaint against me. Apparently, they were upset at how long it was taking them to get their life insurance issued. I swear to God that was their complaint. The longer you are in this business, the more likely you are to have complaints. When you get complaints, there's a process. The OSJ, the Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction, the highest supervisory position in the company in the area, in the geographic area, must maintain a file of all written complaints and all actions taken. Every written complaint must have an action taken. And I told you the story about one of my complaints because I'm now going to tell you about the action that was taken. I remember getting called into the principal's office, my principal's office. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm getting called to the principal's office. What did I do? What did I do? She sits me down at the desk. She goes and sits at her desk after closing the door. And she explains the situation to me. And I'm looking around going, and what exactly did I do wrong? And she proceeded to explain what the action was. And that her advice, and I quote, was, Brian, you need to stop seeing crazy people. If you stop seeing crazy people, you won't have crazy people filing complaints. But she did it with a straight face. I remember it was a straight face. I can only imagine how hard it was for her to keep a straight face for that. But it was a straight face. I also sat down with a client, and I remember this one vividly, even more so than the others. And I remember when I was taught how to, like, introduction to sales, that when you go into someone's house, look for some decoration, some art, some color, something that you have in common so you can start building a bond. And one of the things I sort of enjoy is I collect coins a little bit. Nothing major. I like coins. But this woman had a beautiful framed collection of pennies, including a 1943 steel penny right in the center. And it was beautiful. They were all nice and shiny, all incredibly high condition. And I commented on how beautiful her penny collection was, especially the steel penny. And her response was, "What, are you going to try and steal my pennies?" I actually remember my response on that one when I got back to the office. I took an X-Acto knife and actually cut her name, cut that time slot out of my book. I literally redacted it because I never wanted to see her name again. And so I literally cut it out. Because if you write Sharpie over paper in the right light, you may be able to see it again. But if you literally cut it out with an X-Acto knife, you never see it again. I think I burned it too. I'm not sure. I didn't burn it. I just threw it away. But either way, when you're out there, the longer you're seeing people, the more likely you're going to see crazy people. So you want to make sure in the real world with complaints that you understand they must be in writing, and you don't want to take them. You want to make sure if a client calls you complaining that you explain calmly. You don't want to make the situation worse. And you give them your principal's information and explain, listen, this is my supervisor. I need you by law. It needs to be filed with them. Please get in touch with them and they'll be able to help you fully, or something like that, just so you don't get in more trouble. Now, potential red flags with associated persons. Indicators of irregularities or misconduct. These are potential red flags. Even a red flag isn't necessarily bad. It's probably bad. It could be bad. It's a sign of something that really, warning. These are potential serious warnings. Whoops, sorry, wrong button. Unreasonably large number of trades and accounts in regards to client stated goals. That's called churning. If a client wants a conservative portfolio and you're doing 3 trades a day, something's wrong there. Blanket recommendations. If I am making the same recommendation to a bunch and all of my clients. Now I'll give you an example of this. I just made the same recommendation that these people all get $500,000 life insurance on them. They put $100 a month into a Roth IRA, $100 a month into a 529 plan, and this specific 529 plan. I just did 40 of these. Why? Well, I just happened to get on an Army, Air Force, Marine, Navy base. And I went to all of the newly enlisted personnel with family on base. They're all about the same age. They all have about the same income. They all have about the same expenses. They all have about the same kid's age. They all have about the same desires. Blanket recommendation's fine. It's a potential red flag. Because if I was advising that to people who were in their 20s and in their 50s and in their 70s, some who were conservative, some who were aggressive, all different people, and I made the same recommendation, that's then a problem. So you look, it's one of those, again, potential red flags. It could be a problem, but simply blanket recommendations may not be if it's appropriate, if it happens to be a large group that are all very similar. Maybe someone works at a school and they got 20 teachers that are retiring this year and they're all coming together, all roughly the same age, roughly the same net worth, roughly the same expenses. Probably going to be roughly the same recommendations. Having many other brokerage accounts. There's nothing stopping a registered rep from having brokerage accounts at other firms. Nothing stopping them. Now, why exactly would a rep have 10 other accounts? One account. Two, if you work for a firm that doesn't have individual securities and you really want to trade individual stocks, you may need to go to another firm. Okay, that's one. Why do you need 10? Could it be because you're trying to buy and sell things in such a way that doesn't actually do anything, but it just looks like something's happening, like market manipulation? But you want to do it through 10 or 12 different, a dozen, 2 dozen different accounts so that no one can easily see what you're doing? Or is it because you happen to like toasters and every time you open a brokerage account, they gave you a free toaster, and so you have a dozen toasters at home? You don't actually do anything in those accounts. You put $1,000 in each of them and they're just whatever. Okay. Again, potential red flag, not necessarily a real one. Not wanting to take mandatory vacation. This is always an interesting one because this is an industry where we actually have people that have mandatory vacation. We're used to thinking about all vacation time as optional. Oh, you get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever weeks a year, whatever you don't use, a certain amount you can hold over so you can save up and blah, 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 blah. But you don't have to. And there are certain people that are told once a year, this week, you are not coming in. We don't care where you go. We're going to pay you. You're not coming in. And the people that don't approve that, who don't want that, who fight that, potential red flag. Because the example, and I really should look up more details about this. I hadn't been able to find it. It's sort of a vague story, so it's going to be hard to find real details. But there was I remember hearing back probably 10 years ago of another brokerage. One of the reasons why this came about was there was a guy who worked at this firm. It was probably in the 80s or 90s even. And he was a great guy. Everyone loved him. He was always there. He never was sick. He never took a vacation day. He was there every day. He was there late. He got there early. Anyone needed a problem, he was there to offer suggestion. Anyone needed help, he was there to offer a hand. He was always there. Everything was perfect. He was the best employee at this office. And then one day he got sick. And someone came in to fill in for him. They didn't think anything. I mean, there's nothing wrong. This guy was great. But when this guy who was filling in for him was at his desk, he noticed that some of the accounts seemed to be a little bit weird. He couldn't quite figure out what was going on, and so he sort of called some people over, and they did some more investigating, and this guy I think was out for two or 3 days. By the time he came back in, he was being arrested, because what he was doing was every day he was working, and he was fixing the books, and he had to be there every day to move it, because the accounts would sort of get unbalanced. He had to go and manually fix them, and as long as he was there, no one would have ever found out anything. But as soon as he's out and as soon as he can't do those fixes daily that he needs to keep the scam going, all of a sudden people could see where the scam was. That's why there is now mandatory vacation. For people in certain positions, they must take a vacation so somebody else can come in and make sure they're not doing that. So someone who doesn't want the mandatory vacation is going to raise some eyebrows. Identical explanations on many replacement forms. Again, easily seen as serious problem. I'm just going and I'm seeing a bunch of people and I'm just bringing carbon copy replacement forms because I'm just mass selling stuff without really caring. Could also be that I've got a dozen people who all bought the same type of investment 20 years ago. They're friends. They all come to me and I give all the same replacement. This investment is garbage. It has too many fees and blah, 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 blah. Same word for word garbage because I'm giving them a blanket recommendation. They're the same age, they're the same, same risk tolerance, same objectives, similar things. That's fine. So that's one of those, again, that's rather easy. Some of these are clearly more severe. The not wanting to take mandatory vacations, churning. Those are really, really hard to justify as anything other than like something's going on. But blanket recommendations, many other brokerage accounts, identical explanations, some of those, again, could be fishy, could also be perfectly valid. Maybe someone just likes microwaves or toasters. These are indications of potential problems, not necessarily actual problems. Control and restricted securities. These are covered by Rule SEC 144. There's a lot here. I have a feeling from what I've been hearing and what my guess is on what FINRA is going to be interested in is much more the surface details than the actual like nitty-gritty numbers and things. So as I go through it, I'll explain what I mean by that. They can't normally be sold in a public market. You need to know that restricted and controlled securities have, surprisingly enough, restrictions on them. You can't just sell them necessarily. Controlled securities are held by an affiliate of an issuing company, an officer, a director, large shareholder, 5% or more, or in a control relationship. A control relationship is someone who is controlled by, who is controlling, or who is co-controlled. The idea of co-controlled is if some parent company owns two other companies, those two other companies are in common co-control. They're controlled by the same larger company. Restricted securities are acquired in unregistered private sales, typically private placements, Reg D offerings, or similar. There are 5 general conditions under Rule 144. That first slide, you really want to know everything on there. That's important to understand what control, what restricted, those kinds of things. These are where I think the skimming is going to be more relevant. Understand that there are 5 conditions, that there's a holding period, that there is an amount of time the stock must be held before it can be sold. Now, this only applies to restricted stock, must be held at least 6 months if we're reporting under the SCA 34, the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. And if it's not subject to those reporting requirements, it must be held 1 year. So it's 6 months or 1 year. But there's no holding period restrictions for an affiliate who purchases securities of the issuer in the marketplace. Just because an affiliate owns control or restricted stock doesn't mean they can't go and buy additional stock in their company in the marketplace. That's just regular stock at that point. So you've got to make sure that you recognize that people could have Facebook control, Facebook restricted, though if the person has both control and restricted, I don't think they're separate then. Because if they have control, that means they're an affiliate, which means that they've got, whatever meaningless thing there. But you could then have regular common of the company, which this has no restrictions, no problem on it, just like anybody else. The second general condition under this rule is that they must have current public information. There must be public and adequate information about the issuing company before it can be sold generally in the public then. Can't just go and try and unload stuff to the general public if no one knows anything about the company. It's called snake oil at that point. There's a trading volume formula. There's an unlimited amount on how much stock they can sell. The example I generally give is Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg owns, I believe it's 52% of Facebook. He cannot go and sell all of that stock, at least not quickly. If the affiliate, Mark Zuckerberg's an affiliate, the number of equity securities, the number of stock that he could sell during any quarter, any 3-month period, can't exceed the greater of 1% of the outstanding shares, of the total amount of shares that are outstanding, which means if he owns 50% and let's pretend 50% are outstanding, that's 0.5% that he'd be able to sell. It would take 100 quarters then for him to be able to sell everything, at least 100 quarters? Or the greater of 1% of the average reported weekly trading volume, whichever is greater. What that means, if there's all of a sudden a lot of volume, people are really trading, buying and selling the stock a lot, well, then maybe they can get more than just the flat 1% of the outstanding shares. And again, these numbers, just like on the previous slide in the first 2 points, I don't think these details are that important. Understand that there's limits on the amount that they can sell. Understand that there's that they've got to hold it for certain periods, that there's the holding period, that there's the information that must be available, that there's trading volume limits on how much they can do. Whoops, sorry about that. That ordinary brokerage transactions, these can't be special. They can't get special commissions or payment for these. Basically, Mark Zuckerberg would take 1 million shares or 500,000 shares, whatever the number he'd be able to sell is, and go to just a regular brokerage house and go, hey, if someone wants to come and buy them, I've got these for sale. They can't solicit. It's just people who come in and say, hey, I'm interested in buying Facebook. The broker can go, oh, I've got some Facebook shares here. We'll sell them, in normal way of doing it. Ordinary brokerage transactions. And finally, there must be filing of notice of proposed sale with the SEC. If they're an affiliate, they must file notice with the SEC on Form 144. It's Regulation 144, makes sense. If the sale involves 5,000 or more shares or aggregate dollars in excess of $50,000 in any quarter. The SEC has to be known just in case for like insider trading. Is the reason Mark Zuckerberg is selling all of his shares now is because he knows in a year Facebook's going to have a serious problem? SEC wants to know about that. There was, what was it, Experian? I forget what the, whichever one of the credit agencies about a year ago that was hacked and half of America's credit ratings were released. The CEOs and a bunch of the people on the board happened, purely coincidental, I'm sure, happened to sell a lot of their stock shortly before that became public news. I'm purely coincidental. I'm sure it was purely coincidental. Yeah, the SEC has been investigating that. They've been looking into that. I don't believe that's been resolved yet. Yeah, because that's clearly looking like they were trying to jump ship before they knew the ship was going down, and they had inside information. Restricted stock held by non-affiliates can always be sold after 1 year. There's no restriction then. If you happen to buy in just a private placement or something like that, restricted stock, you can sell it after 1 year with really no restrictions at that point. Unless you have a massive amount and you would then become an affiliate for being a large owner. Outside of that rule, there's no limit. So here's our final cartoon for this unit. We're hoping to appease the tax gods by offering a human sacrifice. And your name came up. That brings us to the end of this unit and these two sections when we talk about associated persons. We're next going to actually have two sections on market makers, on the participants in the market, including market makers and some of the others. But the participants, there are a bunch of other types of people in the markets that we may not be as aware of. So we are going to be spending 2 units on them. Hope you enjoyed this unit, and I'll see you again shortly.